I remember the relentless pull, the siren song of activity, the gnawing belief that to be a trader, I had to be in the market. Every tick, every fleeting price movement without my capital involved, felt like a personal failure, a missed opportunity, a testament to my cowardice. I saw others, or imagined them, making fortunes, and the fear of being left behind was a physical ache, a constant pressure to act, to do something. That was the amateur in me, the one who believed that action equated to progress, that constant engagement was the path to profit. Jesse Livermore's words, amateurs need to trade. Professionals wait for the right trade, cut through that illusion like a surgical blade. But it took years of self-inflicted wounds for me to truly understand their depth. The psychological theme at the heart of this truth is the brutal conflict between patience and overtrading, a battle waged not against the charts, but within the confines of one's own skull. It's the constant tension between the quiet discipline of waiting for the perfect setup and the impulsive, often desperate urge to jump into anything that moves, driven by the illusion of control or the fear of missing out. This isn't just about strategy. It's about the very core of our emotional being, our capacity for discipline versus raw emotion. Every trader has felt the insidious creep of fear turning into an irrational need to get back in, or the intoxicating rush of greed pushing them to over-leverage, to chase the next big score. My central tension, the one that echoed in the lonely hours after a devastating loss, was the silent scream of my internal voice. I knew I should have waited. Every fiber of my being screamed for patience, for the discipline I preached to myself, but the silence of inaction was unbearable. The market was a roaring ocean, and I was stranded on shore, convinced I was drowning by not swimming, even when the waves were clearly too treacherous. I couldn't bear the thought of missing out, of being a spectator while life, or at least opportunity, passed me by. That delusion fueled countless reckless entries. It pushed me into trades born of anxiety, not analysis. Each loss cemented the belief that I was fundamentally flawed, incapable of the discipline I knew, intellectually, was essential. The silence of waiting felt like a betrayal of my ambition. The market's constant hum was a challenge, a dare to prove my worth. I answered it, repeatedly, with impulsive actions that only deepened the wound. The urge to be doing something, anything, was a powerful current, pulling me away from the safety of the shore. I convinced myself that movement, any movement, was progress. It was not. It was often regression, a retreat from capital, a retreat from confidence. The charts were just a canvas for my own internal chaos. My finger hovered over the trigger, an extension of an agitated mind, not a calculating one. I craved the action, the adrenaline, the illusion of control over an uncontrollable force. This craving was my undoing, time and again. It obscured the simple truth Livermore offered. He spoke of a waiting, not a passive waiting, but an active, discerning patience. Amateurs trade because they need to. The compulsion is internal. It is born of fear, of greed, of the desperate need for validation. Professionals wait. They observe. They understand that the market will always present opportunities. Their capital is a tool, not a toy, for their emotions. It is deployed with precision, not desperation. The difference is stark, a chasm between two approaches. One leads to consistent erosion, the other to measured growth. I lived on the amateur side for too long, convinced that my activity was a virtue. I mistook motion for momentum. I believed that if I wasn't in, I was out. Out of what? Out of the game. The game is about survival, about capital preservation first. It is not about constant engagement. It is about strategic engagement. This distinction, so simple, was agonizingly difficult to internalize. My internal voice argued against it. It whispered of missed fortunes, of others getting rich while I sat idle. The fear of missing out was a constant companion, a shadow that stretched across every moment of calm. That shadow was the real enemy. It distorted my perception. It made every quiet day feel like a wasted day. It pushed me to chase fleeting movements, to ignore my own rules, to abandon my own analysis. The pain of a missed opportunity, real or imagined, felt worse than the pain of a small loss. A small loss was a tangible cost, a lesson. A missed opportunity was a torment of the mind, a what-if that lingered, festering. This mental anguish drove me to overtrade, to force setups that weren't there. I would see a flicker, a hint, and my mind would construct an entire narrative around it, a justification for action. My conviction was rarely based on objective data. It was based on the need to participate, the need to feel relevant in a dynamic environment. The market does not care about my need for relevance. It cares only about capital flow, about supply and demand. My emotions were irrelevant to its mechanics, yet they dictated my interaction with it. This was the fundamental flaw. This was the amateur's trap. The professional, I learned, makes peace with inaction. They understand that the market is not always offering a clear path. There are times to act, and there are far more times to simply observe. The greatest trades often come from the longest waits. They are not rushed, they are not forced. They emerge from a confluence of factors, a clear signal that aligns with a carefully constructed plan. This waiting is not passive. It is an active form of discipline. It requires mental fortitude, a quiet strength to resist the urge to silence the internal clamor. It is the practice of seeing the chaos, acknowledging it, and choosing not to engage until the odds are overwhelmingly in your favor. It is a profound act of self-control. It is the ability to say no to yourself, repeatedly, even when every impulse screams yes. This capacity for self-denial, for delayed gratification, separates the enduring from the extinguished. It is the difference between a fleeting moment of perceived glory and a sustainable journey of growth. I had to unlearn everything my amateur self believed about constant engagement. I had to embrace the void, the stillness, the quiet confidence of knowing my moment would arrive. The market, I realized, is a teacher of brutal truths. It strips away illusions, one painful loss at a time. My most profound lessons were not learned from winning trades, but from the ones where I betrayed my own principles, where I allowed emotion to dictate my actions. The shame of knowing better, of having the knowledge but lacking the fortitude to apply it, was a heavy burden. Livermore's words became a mantra, a shield against my own worst instincts. They are not just about trading, they are about life. They speak to the profound power of patience, the quiet strength of discipline, the ultimate wisdom of knowing when to act, and more importantly, when not to. It is a lesson in self-mastery, a battle fought daily within. The silence of waiting, once unbearable, became my greatest ally. It is in that silence that true opportunity reveals itself, not in the frantic noise of constant action. This is the difference. This is the truth. The process was agonizing. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, but a grueling war of attrition against my own impulses. Each time I fought the urge to trade, the internal scream for action was deafening. It felt like denying a part of myself, a fundamental drive. My mind would conjure vivid scenarios of profits I was missing, of trends I was letting slip away. The phantom pains of lost gains were as real as actual losses. But with each successful denial, a tiny fragment of control solidified. I started to observe the market, not as a playground for my emotions, but as a complex system of probabilities. I began to see the patterns of amateur behavior, the very patterns I once embodied, playing out in real time. I watched others succumb to the same siren song, chasing fleeting movements, overtrading, and ultimately liquidating their capital. Their losses, though not my own, became powerful lessons. They reinforced the wisdom of stillness. The shift wasn't about avoiding trades, it was about elevating the criteria for engagement. My focus moved from how much I could make to how little I could risk, and how certain the setup felt. The concept of the right trade became paramount. It wasn't just a good trade, or a promising trade, but a trade that aligned so perfectly with my predefined rules, my analysis, and the prevailing market structure that the decision to act felt almost inevitable, devoid of emotional struggle. This required a meticulous approach, a deep understanding of my edge, and an unwavering commitment to only deploying capital when that edge was clearly present. It meant sitting out days, sometimes weeks, even when the market was volatile, even when everyone else seemed to be reveling in the chaos. I learned to differentiate between market noise and true signals. The former was a constant, distracting hum designed to lure the impatient. The latter was a rare, clear bell, ringing only when conditions were optimal. This distinction became my filter. It allowed me to dismiss the vast majority of opportunities, not as missed chances, but as irrelevant distractions. My trading journal transformed from a record of regret into a testament of discipline. Each entry detailed not just the trade, but the reason for the trade, and more importantly, the reason for not trading. The periods of inaction, once filled with self-reproach, became periods of profound learning and capital preservation. I realized that capital preserved is capital available for the truly exceptional opportunities. It is a resource, not a perpetually active participant. The fear of missing out began to recede, replaced by a quiet confidence in my process. I understood that the market offers infinite opportunities. Missing 1, or 10, or 100 meant nothing in the grand scheme. What mattered was being prepared and present for the right one. This wasn't a passive waiting, but an active, strategic observation. I spent my time analyzing, refining my strategy, understanding market cycles, and most importantly, understanding myself. The battle shifted from trying to conquer the market to conquering my own mind. My opponent was not the chart, but the insidious voices of impatience, greed, and fear within me. This internal warfare was the true crucible. It forced me to confront my deepest insecurities, my need for instant gratification, my inherent human biases. I had to deconstruct the very fabric of my emotional responses to risk and reward. It was a painful, often lonely process. There were still moments of weakness, relapses into the old patterns, each one a stark reminder of how easily the disciplined mind can be swayed. But each relapse also served as a reinforcement, a further etching of Livermore's truth onto my very being. The pain of those relapses was a potent teacher, solidifying the resolve to adhere to the principle of waiting. The market stopped being an adversary and became a mirror. It reflected my internal state. When I was disciplined, calm, and patient, my results improved. When I was agitated, impulsive, or fearful, my capital suffered. The connection became undeniable. My success was less about predicting price movements, and more about managing myself. It was about cultivating an inner stillness, a mental fortress against the external noise. The quiet confidence that grew from this self-mastery was profound. It wasn't arrogance, but a deep-seated belief in the power of my disciplined approach. This wasn't a journey towards perfection, but towards consistency. I learned that consistency wasn't about winning every trade, but about consistently applying my rules, consistently waiting for the high probability setups, and consistently managing my risk. The wins became a byproduct of this discipline, not the primary goal. The true victory lay in the unwavering adherence to the principles I had so painstakingly learned. The emotional intensity shifted from the highs and lows of individual trades to the quiet satisfaction of maintaining inner control, day after day, week after week. The market was always there, an eternal ocean. My task was no longer to frantically swim in every wave, but to patiently wait for the perfect vessel, the perfect tide, and then, and only then, to set sail with purpose. That was the professional's way. That was my way. The market, once a tempestuous sea, I felt compelled to navigate at all costs, transformed. It became a vast, intricate landscape, revealing its true contours only to the patient eye. The frantic noise, the constant chatter of prices, the endless calls to action from every corner, these faded into a background hum. My focus sharpened, not on the fleeting movements, but on the underlying currents, the deeper rhythms that truly mattered. I no longer saw missed opportunities, but rather avoided traps. Each day of inaction was not a day lost, but a day of capital preserved, of mental energy conserved, ready for the moment when the market would undeniably present its hand. This shift was profound. It wasn't about suppressing emotion entirely, but about channeling it, understanding its genesis, and refusing to let it dictate action. The fear of missing out, once a relentless tormentor, became a faint echo, easily dismissed. I knew now that true opportunity would always resurface. Often clearer, often more potent, if I just allowed the chaos to settle. Greed, too, lost its intoxicating grip. The chase for the quick, oversized score gave way to the steady, methodical accumulation that comes from highly selective engagement. My ego, once intertwined with the need to prove myself through constant activity, detached itself. Success was no longer about public validation or winning every skirmish. It was about internal integrity, about honoring the discipline I had fought so hard to cultivate. The real education began when I stopped fighting the market and started understanding its nature. It is indifferent. It has no agenda for my capital. It simply is. My role was not to conquer it, but to align with its clear movements, to capitalize on its undeniable trends, and to step away when uncertainty reigned. This required an almost meditative state of observation, a quiet vigilance that few possess. I learned to read the pauses, the consolidations, the moments of indecision, not as frustrating delays, but as crucial information. These were the market's whispers, indicating when to prepare and when to remain firmly on the sidelines. The clarity that emerged from this disciplined waiting was startling, almost revelatory. My trading journal became a chronicle of intention and adherence, not just results. Entries detailing no trade days were as important, if not more so, than those outlining successful ventures. They represented victories against impulse, against the amateur's relentless pull. Each deliberate abstention reinforced the new neural pathways, strengthening the muscle of patience. I began to see the market not as a series of isolated events, but as a continuous narrative, with chapters of clear opportunity and longer chapters of ambiguity. My job was to patiently read the story, and only participate when the plot was undeniably clear. When the characters' supply and demand were acting in predictable ways. This wasn't passive. It was an active engagement with information, a constant refinement of my understanding. The true power of Livermore's dictum lies in its universality. It extends far beyond the charts into the very fabric of decision-making. Life, like the market, often presents a cacophony of choices, a relentless pressure to act, to do something. But the most profound outcomes, the most strategic advancements, often stem from periods of thoughtful inaction, of waiting for the right confluence of circumstances. It is the wisdom of knowing when to speak and when to listen, when to act and when to observe. This principle, forged in the crucible of financial loss and emotional turmoil, became a cornerstone of my existence. It taught me that true strength is not found in constant motion, but in controlled stillness, in the profound ability to choose the moment. The journey was not without its continued challenges. The old impulses, though subdued, never entirely vanished. They lay dormant, ready to resurface during periods of stress, or when an enticing yet premature opportunity presented itself. But now I possessed the tools, the internal framework, to recognize these insidious whispers for what they were, remnants of the amateur within. Each time they emerged, they served as a reminder of the vigilance required, the ongoing battle for self-mastery. This was not a destination, but a continuous practice, a lifelong commitment to discipline. The quiet confidence I now carried was not born of arrogance, but of a deep, hard-won understanding of myself and the true nature of risk. It was the peace of knowing I was operating from a place of principle, not panic. The market now spoke a different language to me, a language of probability and structure, not of fear and greed. I learned to anticipate the amateur's predictable reactions, to see the patterns of their impatience, their desperation. This wasn't about superiority. It was about understanding the human element that drives so much of market behavior. By detaching my own emotions, I gained a clearer lens through which to observe the collective emotional landscape. This detachment allowed for objectivity, for decisions rooted in analysis rather than impulse. My capital was no longer a pawn in an emotional game, but a disciplined soldier, deployed only when the strategic advantage was overwhelming, when the battle was truly worth fighting. This was the enduring lesson. This was the quiet power of waiting. My lasting peace. My lasting peace was not an end to challenges, but a profound shift in how I met them. The gnawing anxiety that once compelled constant action had dissolved, replaced by a quiet certainty. I no longer battled charts. I simply observed, waiting for undeniable signals, high-probability setups aligned with my discipline. This was Jesse Livermore's profound truth. carved into my being through painful lessons. Amateurs chase, professionals wait. This distinction became the bedrock of my approach, transforming my trading and my entire perspective on decision-making. And so, the relentless pull of constant activity, the siren song that once lured me to ruin, now held no power. True strength lies not in ceaseless motion, but in strategic stillness. The market, in its brutal wisdom, taught me ultimate self-mastery. It forced me to confront and dismantle my impulsive, greedy, fearful parts. The discipline I once preached became integral. In patient observation, clarity emerges. The right trade is not just external, it is an internal alignment, preparation, meeting opportunity, free from emotional noise. Ultimately, this journey transcended trading. It became a profound lesson in how to live. How often do we rush into decisions, driven by anxiety, by fear of missing out on life's fleeting opportunities, only to find ourselves adrift? The wisdom of waiting, of discerning the opportune moment, is universal. It applies to careers, relationships, every significant choice. This capacity for self-denial, for delayed gratification, is the crucible of true success and peace. Patience is not passive. It is an active, powerful force. My path, forged in overtrading, led to deliberate action, guided by the timeless truth that professionals wait. Therefore, I urge you to reflect on your own impulses. Do you trade because you need to, or because conditions are undeniably right? Are you battling the market, or yourself? This internal conflict is universal. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced this brutal battle between patience and overtrading? What lessons have you learned? If this message resonated, if it offered clarity, please consider liking this and subscribing to the channel for more reflections on discipline, markets, and the relentless pursuit of self-mastery. Let us continue this journey together, embracing the quiet power of waiting.